So this is Monday, a fine Monday it is. We're nearly the end of September, Pat, and the weather
Yeah,
is holding up remarkably well.
yeah.
And do you find things benign and optimistic about Donegal?
Jude, when you just said there was the 19th or the end of September, how do you look? It is the 19th. You're actually right. We've
Mm.
passed the middle of September, so we're heading on. Jude, it's lovely the weather's so far.
Hmm.
Aren't we grateful for the fact that
Oh
considering
yes, yes,
the fuel prices out there,
yeah.
it's a very mild day. But anyway, Jude, by the way, is it over yet? The funeral of Her Majesty Queen
Uh,
Elizabeth II.
well, I haven't been watching it, Pat,
Neither have I. To tell you the truth.
but I did sit in when I was having my lunch and I watched a march down, what do they call it? Horse
Horse
guards
Guards Parade
parade or
or something.
whatever. Big
So,
long mile, like.
uh,
Um, and my wife was telling me she was watching it and she said that they had had the service and so on in Westminster or wherever.
Abbey. Uh,
Westminster Abbey, yeah, with the Archbishop of Canterbury and various people doing the readings. I think
yeah,
Liz Truss was one of the people who did one of the
yeah.
readings, and all the rest of it, saying nice things about the Queen. But it'll go on for a long time. I mean, they still have to get it out to Windsor, where she's
Not
actually going to be
there's going to be a
buried.
private ceremony there, isn't there?
Well, I mean, it was past time that it was because all the rest of it has been so. Well, all right, you tell me, Pat. Have you found it enjoyable viewing?
Judah, someone. As I said the last day, I have a real thing, I have a conscience thing about being disrespectful, but I have found this unbelievably tedious. It's
Mm.
gone on far, far too long. And Judah, I'm going to throw this out because I really do think it. There's shades of definitely North Korea here. The great leader. This sort of the Brits have spent years sneering at we Kim Jong Il or whatever the hell do you call him, and about the newscasters coming on and their obsequiousness and all the rest of it. Jude, geez, I've watched what 10, 12 days now of non-stop programming that benights the Queen about how wonderful she is, and as we said on Friday, I think, like, if you try to protest, see how you get on.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
and even the fact that during today's funeral, Heathrow Airport is basically shut down, so there will be no noise of planes.
Uh,
Jesus, it's
it's sort of
and the,
ridiculous.
the whole society, and this sort of uh, uncritical, unappraising. It's just everything. There's no appraisal or no nothing. It's just been no deification, deification,
Mhm.
and
Deification,
this,
that's the word I had as well.
yeah,
It's not so much scientific. I mean, when people die, we make sense of them to a certain
yeah, and,
extent, and you don't
and
want to
fair
see
enough,
evil of the dead. But
uh,
this is raising the Queen to, the level of a god almost.
yeah,
Another thing I felt sorry for was the commentators.
yeah.
They were this morning. I heard that they said it twice. They said, "Watching this now, and the crowds are taking in what they see."
Uh,
The crowds are taking in what they
what
see.
they say,
What? I
uh,
mean, I thought I was sure Monty Python was going to leap out of the wings and
it's like
take
an
a
ad I
laugh
hear
all of
quite
them.
frequently on TV or local radio. When it's gone, it's gone.
Yeah.
You're going, yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Could they be had for false advertising in a sense?
What
Because
do you mean?
if you look at the I was looking during my lunch at the parade of the soldiers or sailors or whatever, all like political
Yeah.
people, including Prince Harry. I noticed in a suit,
Uh,
but with a range, a chest full of medals. That's really seems to me to be all the trappings of a great power, a great empire. But
mm,
that's not the case anymore. Britain is
uh,
not a great empire. It is not a great power.
mm,
It's a power in decline. So is that
absolutely.
not false advertising to tell the world essentially we're
Yeah, but the whole
terrific,
idea,
don't mess with us?
I think there's a sort of delusion in Britain generally that they're a great power. They act as, basically they're living on past glories. That
Hmm.
when they were once ruled India and Africa and wherever, and so on. And I think when their buccaneer capitalists went out and introduced slavery to the world and whatever, Jude, it's all that's gone. Even, isn't it, Barbados and 5 or 6 other
Yeah,
islands
yep.
want to leave the Commonwealth and so on. And I noticed there's an American, I think she's an American professor. Her and Piers Morgan got on, I noticed this morning, and well, I read it before as well. And a real thing about the Commonwealth and the role of the British Empire on days gone by. And the woman is unapologetic. She's saying basically, you introduced slavery, you introduced all sorts of calumnies and injustices against native people, and you have the nerve to turn around and sort of say you did it for our good. It's great stuff. And basically, no, I don't agree with it. She said she hoped the Queen died an excruciating death. I don't agree.
No,
No, that's way over the top.
no.
But her point about the role of the British Empire.
Hmm.
No, I don't think anybody can do.
Well,
By the way, I was still wondering, Jude, why do people ruin a legitimate argument by gratuitous insulting?
Yeah. Well, I was trying to think. I mean, this clearly has been stretched out to snapping point over the last 10 days, where they're saying, as they say, the best they can say is the crowds are taking in what they see. But I read an article where they suggested that the decision is taken better to be over the top with this stuff than to be under the top, because the right-wing press in Britain would immediately leap on it, and it would be touted again and again and again that they hadn't shown sufficient respect for the death of the Queen. Whereas the people like yourself and myself who might feel offended a bit by this over-the-top stuff will, brush it off and forget about it. But if you undercook, you're really going to pay for it. So these guys are playing safe. I really don't know. There's an effort to present it as being a kind of a timeless monarchy. See, they talk about, for example, the 13th century and so on. Yeah. And I heard them talking about whatever it was that was on the coffin as it went down this Horse Guards parade as being, a part of a tradition. It's been there since 1901. I suddenly began to think, well, actually, a lot of these trappings, and I remember Eamon McCann making this point, a lot of these trappings, the coach, this orb, and so on, a lot of those have been fed inside the last 100 years or so, rather than something stretching back to the 13th, 14th century.
Yeah. As we said the last day too, a lot of the stuff on the crown and so on have been stolen from other countries. So let's,
Yeah. But is it, my wife says it's soft power and it's working very well. Everybody in the world coming to London for it.
Absolutely. And that's what the BBC and I haven't seen it, but the bits I've seen, the fact that Macron's there, Joe Biden's there, the German Chancellor, I presume's there. Putin hasn't been invited, and of course, our Michael D. Higgins is there, and Micheál Martin's there. What is it, 600 something VIP guests or something like that? Oh no, it is a show. But it's Disney and it's a fairy tale and all. A modern day king and queen and all this sort of stuff who live in these big palaces. Like it's almost a harking back to some sort of fairy tale times, isn't it?
Well, then you have to conclude from that.
But nobody can do pageantry like the Brits.
No, but I mean, what you just said, though, you have to say that the English people or the British people are delusional. Yeah. That they have this delusion that, everything's great and the Queen is their mother and looks after them and so on.
Yeah.
Because the facts of the matter, that isn't the case. But there's a line in Gilbert and Sullivan, I think it's the Paris of Penzance, where they say, with all our faults, we love our Queen. And they were talking about Queen Victoria.
Yeah.
The British people love the monarchy. They love it.
Absolutely.
And they don't begrudge the money at all. It really is amazing. So you find yourself caught in the end between saying, look, this doesn't make sense, and seeming to be a bit of a curmudgeon, or letting it go and saying, well, that's their decision, not ours,
Yeah, it's crazy, Jude. Apparently they were handing out blankets to those people queuing over this last while. Jude, all the poor people who were living on the streets didn't hand out blankets to them. We might come on to it later on, but anyway, there's real poverty in Britain, and
Oh,
there's
yeah.
all the rest. How much is it costing all this?
Oh,
But
yes, that's what
yeah,
I thought.
nobody asks a question.
What would you say?
See, all,
I
see,
say I would say 500 million.
I would say that would be Jude, and I'd say you might add 500 more.
Because
You
there
know,
was a banquet last night for 500 people,
yeah,
and they
and
wouldn't have
Jude,
been having
and
fish and chips.
I presume. Well, I don't know if they're paying the road, but I presume the royal or somebody's putting these people up in various places, and
Oh, yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah.
and the cost of security. That I'm sure a lot of the overtime for police and army or what. I do have army people get overtime. I don't know.
Well,
Anyway,
yeah, but I think the British people would say, "Look at us, look at what we have. I bet you wish you had one of these. I bet you wish you had a royalty." And
no,
well,
absolutely
we
not.
don't, but there's a lot of people in the sense that do, in a
Oh,
way.
ah,
Like they
oh,
don't quite want it, but they certainly admire it.
yeah.
And the
But
very
Judy,
fact that all these big shots are coming
hold
shows
on,
it.
Judy, let me run this, and I want to hear your answer. I keep hearing this that the royal family is so great for tourism and all this, and that's one of the big things that it's used. It's always trotted out.
Don't agree with
Paris,
that.
the
Don't
French,
agree. Don't agree.
the
Don't
French don't
agree.
have the French don't have
No,
a
no.
king, and that is the most. Paris is the most visited city in the world.
That's right. So, and the Palace of Versailles and all that stuff.
Yeah,
You don't have to have a monarch, but they have one and they like it.
yeah.
Anyway, I think we've bashed the guts out of that pot.
Ah,
And I don't want, it's a tricky one because you don't want to be bad mouthing the dead.
no, and I've no
But
objection to
you
doing that.
could bad mouth David Beckham for
Yeah.
appearing ostentatiously to
I
have
know,
waited in
no, so
line.
Richard, here's I'm going to disagree with that. Like, I have, as we have now established, I am not a royalist. In fact, I have a real issue with royalism. I think it's a disgraceful threat that
Mm,
anybody at this day and age
mm.
looks up to somebody because they're an accident of birth. But right, here's the point. David Beckham, irrespective of what you think, stood for 12 hours. And apparently he had the option of getting a VIP, one of the MPs. He stood with ordinary people for 12 hours and paid his respect, the same as everybody else, and left. Now, okay, maybe he's looking for his knighthood, whatever, but he done it. And at least, and he didn't use that, that looked like what he call her Wallaby and the other guy. They Q jumped, So
Well,
I'll give him credit where it's due. I
you're
wouldn't have
kind,
done it.
Pat. You're very kind. I see him as having done a good act with thunderous stealth. The world.
Jude, would you stand for 13 hours? I don't give a shit if
Well, if
they're
I could
offering
get the
me.
publicity that he's getting, I mean, good
He doesn't need
publicity.
the publicity. He's going to get. He's worth 300 million.
But it's never enough.
All he
It's
has to
never
do is get a
enough.
new haircut, and he's going to get publicity. There's
It's
no
never
way.
enough.
Nah.
And it's good. I mean, it's the kind of thing that is invaluable for a guy like Beckham who's living abroad, presumably down about
Yeah.
wherever it is that he has a football team.
But no matter what he does, it's going to be wrong.
Mm.
I read a wee bit.
I like the guy, mind you. I like him. I
I
just saw
have
that
always
about.
thought him pretty decent, and
Yeah.
so on. And like he believes in it, so I'm not
Mm.
going to slag him.
Well, okay. Somebody else. Well, I'm tempted to keep going on with this, but somebody else said that soccer was picked out for making sure that it cancelled its games the first weekend and then clapping at the 70th minute and so on.
Yeah.
Whereas all sorts of other sports, rugby and so on, they didn't bother. I mean, I think they showed the Queen at the beginning and they maybe sang the anthem and that was it. But soccer has, had to toe the line. Anyway.
Soccer is the game of the working people, and the working people have to be reminded of their betters. The rugby and golf are the ruling classes games.
Did you see where Derry City won last night?
Yes, against Shamrock Rovers.
Very good. They're now tipped to win the cup.
Yep.
Yeah, good show. Okay, let's move to the common folk. And you mentioned this, food banks. And you're telling me that there's 2,200 food banks in Britain?
Right. There's a guy called Enda Brady. He's actually Irish. He was on RT this morning, or News Talk. I'm not quite sure. News Talk, I think it was. And he was just talking about the funeral today. And he says, it's remarkable the fact, he says, against all this sort of the money being spent and so on, that there's 2,200. And I think, Jude, by the way, I think I might have said Britain. I think he's referring to England. 2,200 food banks. Now, 2,200 food banks. I presume that's more than McDonald's. And this in a country where what do you call it? The what do you call them? The energy companies are expected to make £171 billion profit this year,
Yeah.
and Liz Truss has ruled out actually taxing those windfall profits. You sort of go, and yet these people vote Tory, and you go. I keep asking that question though. Turkeys and Christmas, whatever. What do people need to get in Britain? What sort of education, political education, or awareness do they need to get that that a Tory party that refuses to tax corporations making huge money is not a party that's looking out for their interests? Like
Uh,
how large does the sign have to be before they cop on?
I have a feeling this one's going to be large enough. I think there's a stirring among unions, such as I haven't seen for at least 30, 40 years, with Mick, what's his name?
Mike Lynch.
Lynch. I have a feeling people will be driven to it. I mean, if you're really literally at the stage where you can't heat your home, or you can't eat, or you're really on your uppers,
Yeah.
people are just going to say, this is no good. We have to change this. And the same thing, incidentally, applies to the South. Although I've got some interesting figures here for you, Pat.
Yeah.
Yeah, you said that this was, if you take England, one of the richest countries in the world, and
Yeah.
yet we've got these banks. I looked up and I found the figures from the IMF, International Monetary Fund, the figures for April 2022.
Yeah.
And they listed by GDP the nations of the world. Well, they would call them nations. I call them states myself.
Yeah.
There
you go again.
Guess who's at number 3?
Who?
The South of Ireland.
For
number
what?
3. Britain, the UK is at, no, the US is at 9th.
Yeah.
And the UK is at 28.
Yeah.
So
That's for what, Jude? For what?
for GDP, that's
All right.
gross domestic product. And that's
yeah.
usually seen as a sign of how well is the economy working,
Yeah.
how good is it in terms of jobs and people's lives and, financial affairs generally.
Yeah. Jude, I'm not going to name it, but there's a guy doing a wee bit of work in this house, and he was telling me there quite recently that he tried to get, he needs help. He said if he never got a phone call between now and Christmas, he wouldn't miss it because he has so much work already on. And in fact, he could take on at least another person. He says can't get anybody, and he's offering good money. There's a young fella, he's a landscaper, and he said, I know him, and he says he's been looking for, he's so much work, and some of it's very physical, and he says he's offered good money, can't get anybody. Jude, it's unbelievable. And this, I'm talking about Donegal. Years ago, people were leaving here, Jude, in droves because they couldn't find work. Now they can't find workers.
Is it really, are all those other people, those people who turned down the prospect of working with this man you're talking about, have they got jobs?
I presume they must be well enough off, like I'm not putting words in the man's mouth, but he said he offered good wages to people, and he says, like he's getting a good livelihood out of himself. So I don't know what exactly, but he says simply, he said he put an advertisement even in the paper, looking for apprentice decorators, painters and decorators. He's got no response.
Well,
And Jude, I've talked to you, Jude. Here, I don't know where it's like, say where you're living, but try finding a plasterer, a plumber, a carpenter.
Oh, that's true.
I'm going to say it'll be the last time we needed someone done rather urgently. Someone says, "Look, it'll be about 10 days before I'll be able to get to you."
Wow. It's a tricky one, because I was amazed at this figure that we all agree that the South, the Republic of Ireland, is a prosperous state and is doing extremely well compared to the North, for example. But it amazed me that it would be so high above the US and the UK.
You said what? America's 9, and what did you say?
That's correct. The US is 9th and the UK is 28th.
Who's number 1? Is it Norway or Denmark?
Luxembourg.
Luxembourg.
Small scale. All the rich people go there. But the other thing that I checked, because otherwise you would say, well, then the South must be a wonderful place. And in many ways it is a wonderful place, but not everybody's living high on the hog. Because if you, according to the figures again, internationally, 2% of the world's population own more than half the world's wealth.
Uh,
So it's a question of distribution. It's not just how
uh,
well things are,
well,
if you like.
that's what Mike Lynch said. It isn't a question the money isn't there. It's the
Mm.
By the way, Jude, you just said someone, so let me throw it at you. It's not, but there was a woman on last night on social media. She said her son, something happened to him, I think at the weekend. And she said he went down to, they're living in Luxembourg. That's what brought it to mind.
Yeah.
She says they were able to see a consultant within something like a couple of hours, and he had been treated and all the rest of it. She says Luxembourg spends exactly the same per capita as Ireland does on health services, and ours is a joke. It's totally unfit for purpose. There are nearly 1 million people now, as far as I remember, from the last occasion, awaiting hospital appointments and whatever else they need, and the system is a joke. There's something, and by the way, there's I think there was just, my dear missus was telling me there was somebody on this morning. There's 10 student nurses somewhere at some hospital. 7 of them have already decided to leave.
Mm. But you see, it might be, Pat, that they're starting from a long way back.
What do you mean?
That's the only conclusion I can come to, is that whereas other countries, perhaps some states, would have a health service is pretty healthy, so to speak, that the South are so behind in terms of looking after people medically that they're going to have to spend an awful lot of money.
No, Jude, I think there's a legacy of an old system where, Jude, if you have private health insurance and you're diagnosed with, God forbid, cancer or something, if you've got private insurance, you can see a consultant literally within days.
Mm.
If you are on the other system, the non-private system, you can wait months or weeks anyway, certainly. It's something is seriously
well,
wrong.
But
hold on, can I finish the point? There seems an unwillingness, either at official level or in the medical professions, to address it, and that there's something wrong there.
Mm. Well, I was reading some of the plans, a very vague indication of the plans, what money they would put into it. David Cullinane, who's the spokesman for health, saying what the Shinners would do, and he claimed they were all costed and so on. Now, whether or not that would address it, well, let's say it should be right at the top of their agenda. It's it really is. I mean, you say your first job is to protect your people. That doesn't mean you devise an army. That means you look after your people by building hospitals, having doctors and nurses and people that will take care of them. Not having loads of soldiers who can fend off imaginary enemies. So, but again, that figure. I mean, I know you're saying that England is particularly unequal. I'm wondering, I'd say it really fits into a general thing. I mean, there are some people in Ireland, in the south of Ireland, who are obscenely rich.
Yeah, absolutely.
But that has always been the case. And in some ways, I mean, the Sunday Independent used to print the rich list. And people loved it. Oh, it's a real ringer. And let's see. Oh, God, look at that. Here we have an Irish man who's one of the richest people in the world. Whoa, good stuff. For God's sake. It's very easy to get caught up in that,
Oh,
very easy to get caught up in it. One of our own is really rich. I can't afford to buy any groceries, but he's really rich.
Remember, was it his name was or something? He launched them, what he called heating and their electrical implements.
Dimplex.
Eddie or something. It's worth Lord something other than. It's worth 4.5 billion or something.
Yeah. Well, there you are. Well, then again, you see the case of this guy. What's his name? Up in Fermanagh, where he was hugely rich, and then everything fell apart.
Quinn.
Quinn, of course, Sean Quinn. So it's hard to know. Tricky. Right, anyway, the world is ill divided, Pat. Let's move on to how the world is shaping up in the Ukraine. Because you tell me that Putin's back is now against the wall, or at least some journalists are saying that.
Yeah, there's a guy. He's a foreign affairs guy. He's not a foreign affairs in Ireland. He's an American guy. He's an academic as well, and he's a professor. I was reading an article. I should have written his name down, but it was in the Irish Times this morning. And he says Putin is now. He says his back is against the wall. The retaking of a large amount of territory by the Ukrainian army Plus, the Russian army is starting to sort of disintegrate a little bit. They're getting done for the war crimes, and he says there's increasing evidence of dissent within Russia that it's not going well, and he says Putin's whole persona is of the hard man, that nobody will oppose him and so on, and that this is what he's, and he also, because of previous events in Crimea and Georgia, he had built up this reputation. I'll do what I want and nobody's going to stop me.
Yeah.
And he says now suddenly his back is against the wall. There's dissent creeping in. They're starting to lose territory rather than gain territory in Ukraine. And his army is proving less than effective. Plus, the West is bailing in with what Americans apparently have given 16.5 billion in armament so far to the Ukrainians. Yeah. So he says this is where it starts to get dangerous, because he says Putin, his back is now. He says if his back is not against the wall right now, if it could be very shortly, and he says he will be getting it both domestically and internationally. And he says the chances are there's there's a possibility that they will try and use some sort of maybe possibly low-grade nuclear weapons in Ukraine. And he says what happens then? But secondly, he says the big guys and the generals and so on are becoming less and less enamored with what's happening, because their lifestyles are getting imploded big time. Yeah. So well, you get the message.
Yeah, I could believe some of that now. Clearly, well, I have to believe what we're told. But don't forget, you could be told stuff's not true.
Absolutely.
And where all this is filtering through the Western system. But let's say that Ukraine has taken back territory that was that Putin invaded. And I'm glad that's the case. If Putin's back is against the wall or he's being defeated, I'm glad of that too. But I'll tell you something, Pat. I don't believe it. I don't believe that Ukraine, even though the poor weapon was in from other parts, from the US and the UK and so on, I don't believe that the Ukraine, big though it is, can take on somebody as strong and big as Russia and beat them. Yeah. Now, what they might be able to do is do sort of what happened in the North or in Ireland generally a century ago, where you could have guerrilla warfare against an invader who was in the country. But I don't see them beating Russia in sort of conventional warfare terms. I see it more likely as being, the way things worked with Russia in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
They did the same mistakes as the Americans made in Vietnam. They were there for about a decade or more. And then, eventually they had to say, well, that's it. Let's get out of here. That's not going to work. That's the way I think.
The thing is, but there's 42, 44 million Ukrainians, right? I don't know, the Russian army, maybe 500,000, whatever it is. The Ukrainians, have you noticed most of the people who have come to Ireland as refugees or whatever you like to call them, are women and children? They have more than half of the people, I presume male in Ukraine, have stayed to fight. That is one massive. They've all been armed. And by the way, Jude, they are. I heard a guy on sometime. One of the biggest things in any army is motivation, and the Ukrainians are motivated. That's true. This is their people. This is their family. They will fight to the death. The Russians are running away because a lot of them are very poorly trained, and they don't want to die somewhere for Putin's war.
Nobody wants to. I can say that, all right, but I'd be a bit dubious that all that we're told is true.
Yeah,
I hope it's true. I really, really hope it's true. I'd love to see him kicked out of there. I agree with
you, Jude. You have to always put on sort of blinkers and sort of say, what are we actually saying here?
Yeah. Anyway, let's say the Ukraine are doing better than we expected. I don't see Putin resorting to nuclear weapons. I mean, except he's suicidal. Except he's suicidal. I wouldn't think he'd do that. Okay, let's finish up, Pat, because we've only got 3 minutes left. And we haven't had a light little number. This is as light as I can get it. There are moves to have a 4-day week. In fact, there's a bit of research going on the ground. There are 73 companies in England, or Britain anyway, 3,000 employing 3,300 workers. They started this project in June, and they're going to end it in November to see what effect it has when you have a 4-day week rather than a 5-day week for workers.
Yeah.
Now, how does it sound to you, Pat? Would you go for that?
Absolutely, Jude. I think what I went down, as I've mentioned on several occasions in the past, the youngest son is involved in the computer industry. And I went down, and when he was a young fella, I went down and met his boss one day, just a guy I happened to run into. And we were talking, and he made this great point. He says, years ago, he says, people went out in the field and worked and so on, and they worked physically, and they come home in the evening and they had their dinner and they sat down and fell asleep in the chair. And he says, but there was that sort of outdoor life. He says the big thing for people now is they're inside, and they're inside their heads all day. And he says mental health will be the biggest issue for this generation, because they're sitting all the time using their head, not their hands, not their and so on. And he says the need to do something else, to go out and play golf. Leisure time will be the big issue for people who are spending all day at computers.
Well, actually,
they're going to need to get away from them.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd welcome a 4-day week, and I'm sure that they'll get the same product at the end of it all, because I know people will be motivated to work harder during the 4. And we waste a lot of time. Everybody knows you waste a lot of time at work, coffee and all that stuff. But the thing is, you mentioned leisure time. Leisure will cost. You see, they reckon, for example, that the average family with parents with kids, oh boy, we're nearly out of time, would be likely to save £2,000 over a year from costs for nursery and travel and so on. But if you've got leisure time, you're not going to sit in the house the whole time. You're going to be going places, and you're going to be spending money.
That's the economy too, Jude.
And your home heating as well.
Yeah.
No, so it's not all positive, but certainly it's something I'd like to see. It'll be really interesting. I'm glad they're doing it.
If you're working from home anyway, you have on the heating anyway.
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Okay, Pat, I'm afraid we're going to have to just deprive our viewers of our presidents. There's no more time. Like, we've crammed so much fun into this. It's just there's no more. Okay. See you, Pat. Thank you very much.
Good luck. Bye. Bye.